Located in Tete district of Mozambique, the Vulcan mine in Moitis and the Chirodze mine in Marara are owned by the Indian conglomerate Jindal. In January 2025, a Mozambican court ordered halting of operations for 90 days at the Vulcan mine because it exceeded the acceptable pollution levels. The Chirodze mine, officially known as JSPL Mozambique Minerals LDA, was inaugurated in 2013 by the then Mozambican president Armando Guebuza. At the time, there were people living in the mining area who were not relocated before the operation started. For investors, this is just the cost of doing business, collateral damage that they don't really care about. But for the residents living around these mines, this is a living hell. A Mozambican government minister admitted that Vulcan was putting communities at extreme risk. Yet, months later, the earth still shudders with their blasts. The air is thick with coal dust, and every surface you touch is covered with coal particles. For years, I have been tracking the dubious activities of Indian conglomerates in India and now also across different parts in the world. This is a transnational playbook. As an Indian journalist, seeing an Indian company causing all kinds of problems so far from home forces a reckoning. This isn't just their story, it's ours too, of our possible complicity and ignorance. With Africa Uncensored, we are here to trace these lines of exploitation, crimes, and impunity so that accountability can not only be demanded but fought for. And this needs to happen not just here in Mozambique, but also in India and around the world, where corporate greed goes unchecked. Indian companies entered Africa in the name of development. In Ethiopia, Karaturi Global and Ruchi Soya took control of more than 100,000 and 150,000 hectares of fertile land for industrial farming at throwaway prices.
What Karaturi is doing is, I believe, what Africa needs, wants, and deserves.
Across Ghana, Senegal, Mozambique, and Tanzania, Gravita India Limited operates lead battery recycling plants where investigations documented severe lead contamination around the facilities, putting communities at risk. In Cameroon and the Republic of Congo, Metsa Trading runs lead smelting operations in areas where soil and residential zones have been severely contaminated. Another lead battery recycling plant in Mombasa, Kenya is linked to over 100 deaths in 2012 due to lead poisoning, with many others still suffering from chronic illness including kidney failures, skin diseases, infertility, even after a decade and a half. In Nigeria and Ghana, Avio Pharmaceuticals exported unlicensed opioid combinations that fueled a growing drug crisis. Mining giant Vedanta polluted waters and land in Zambia, where local communities won a lawsuit against the company. Protests and backlash swept across Kenya as the government handed over key airport and power transmission contracts to India's Adani Group. From land grabs to toxic metals to polluted rivers to exploitative minings and corrupt contracts. These are not isolated incidents. These are patterns of exploitation and extraction. This is one such story of an investigation into a multi-billion-dollar mining giant in Mozambique.
When we look at what type of projects come to Africa and what options are given to Africa, so it is usually just supplying raw materials. And even the infrastructure that's built is usually to extract and move these resources out. It's not for the people.
The promise of development often masks a harsher reality, where the wealth extracted from African soil fuels distant economies, leaving behind a legacy of debt, dependency, and poverty. The huge coal mining boom was supposed to transform Mozambique, but decades later, it has only worsened the situation. People's lives are at risk, their health and future uncertain, as coal dust and smoke fills the skies and lungs. For generations, communities in Tete province have lived off this very land. Now it is carved up by coal concessions dominated by a few international players, who interestingly are all Indian, including the steel giant Jindal and its subsidiary Vulcan. An Indian government-owned company, ICVL, also has a mine here. Jindal is well known in Tete, and locals claim that the Mozambican president is also taken care of by the company. He allegedly stays in Jindal's properties when in India and is likely to side with Jindal in case of any disputes. This is Mozambique's coal curse, courtesy of India.
That one is section 6, this one's section 4.
Para começar, somos vizinhos da mina. Nós vivemos esse cenário já desde 2014 até então. Nós vivenciamos um cenário muito crítico, onde o Estado não quer intervir e nós como povo já estamos cansados. De facto, como as imagens ilustram, nós temos só uma diferença de 10 metros da mineradora à população. Como podem ver, as imagens ilustram por si, numa primeira fase, mesmo a Vulcan não nos trouxe consequências benéficas, tanto como a Vale. A Vale também deixou o problema e a Vulcan está a dar continuidade dos mesmos problemas que a Vale deixou. Porque se a Vale tivesse resolvido, eu espero que estaremos numa boa. A situação piora no tempo em que já entra a Vulcan, porque a Vale conseguia controlar as detonações. Quando entra a Vulcan, já o controle da detonação não tem sido aquele anterior. Temos detonações maciças. É pena que hoje é sábado e vocês vão sair um pouco mais cedo, teriam presenciado o impacto do tremor da terra. O que mais piorou é a situação das nossas casas. Devido à detonação, temos inúmeras casas com rachas graves, que não se explica. Podemos mostrar isso com evidência, porque tem algumas casas por aqui que podemos dar imagem como evidência. De lá para cá também, fora da poluição, temos as chuvas de pedras, que afetam a zona ribeirinha ainda da mineração.
The mine operates 24/7. Blasts shake homes and rattle the lives of those living here. Edgar tells us how this is a constant threat for the 800 houses bordering the mine. This fence, meant to separate them from the mine, is a cruel joke. However, life goes on.
Meu nome é Jamal Eugênio Esteves, estou cá neste bairro Chipanga e daqui até a mina eu acho que não passa mais de 500 metros. Temos uma mina bem aqui perto. Depois de alguns meses, acho que quando eu já tinha uns 4 meses, 3 a 4 meses, ela já começava, 4 meses, ela já mostrava problemas respiratórios, ela tossia com frequência e até hoje. Quando fomos no hospital com a criança, por causa mesmo dessa tosse, uma das questões que eles colocaram é o baile. O que eu posso dizer é que a empresa não nos respeita, nós como moradores, como nativo. Esse é o primeiro ponto. Parece que eles fazem das suas, né? Não se preocupam conosco, eles só estão preocupados com a exploração do carvão. Os tribunais, por exemplo. Porque normalmente as organizações que trabalham conosco, como a Justiça Ambiental, eles poderão melhor saber encaminhar esses casos para os tribunais, caso seja necessário.
Vivo neste bairro da Liberdade desde 2007. Mas o que eu sei é que quando em 2007, quando eu estava a viver aqui, já havia problema desse de carvão. Acusou tuberculose, fiz a medicação, passou naquela altura. E este ano também, em janeiro, também tive este problema. Fui medicando, estive no estado de gravidez e acabei tendo um aborto. Eu comecei a ter problemas. Porque nesse tempo eu tossia muito. Quando fui para o hospital, Eles deram medicamento lá, fui tomando e eu já não estava a aguentar. E solução no hospital, disseram que devia ter um aborto, tinham que me abortar. Isso foi já lá no hospital provincial.
Ife governo mbadzwakale nkhani zentsene zomwe zikuchitika muno. Soke palibe chomwe chikuchitika. Timbalekala mari yawo nkhani ya malasha tikubonera na pfumbi akuti chitali chinthu. Ati achipeza manama tunemba madzina kada munthu kada nyumba mpatambira 10,000 machitikanari kudziona bzimwebzo. Neo metekala anati kuti apoyali.
Liberation 12 is a village situated between Vulcan's mine and Jindal's coal storage. Despite its name, Liberation, the residents here are anything but free. They are forced to live with constant noise from Jindal's train nearby and surrounded by coal dust. Touching the leaves of any trees that are still standing will turn your hands black. This is not normal. This should not be normal. The people living here have to deal with multiple health issues: tuberculosis, miscarriages, chronic coughing. For these communities, it's a daily reality. We attempted to speak to a doctor at the local hospital. After a 2.5 hours wait, we were told that he was instructed by his boss not to talk on camera. Off camera, he told us that they could not confirm whether these issues are due to coal and mining, as they don't have advanced equipment and scientific evidence to back it.
Because we need X-ray, for example. X-ray. You make the X-ray before and the X-ray after.
The time I was working here, Valley, it was heavy, good condition. But now, if it is safety, telling something, you say faculty can fire your job. Pollution is 100%. Vulcan, don't have time for not anyone. You are working there inside. You've got the call, dusting, one mask using one day. It's impossible. Not possible. Valley was have respect for the people, but the Vulcan you don't have. You want the production.
2.5 hours away from Vulcan mine, another older Jindal operation in Marara tells a different yet equally grim story. Near the Chirodzi mine, communities were resettled to make way not just for coal but also gold, which locals were living off. The company promised a new beginning. However, the reality is a landscape of broken promises.
So something that we notice when these big transnational companies come in, when these big investments come in with this narrative of development, they fail to understand the connection that people have with the land, right? So everything becomes about a monetary compensation or about an improved house. And it seems like they really can't grasp the connection that people have for living for generations in that piece of land. You know, it's not something that can be transferred elsewhere, you know, because you have ties with the land, you depend on the land, you preserve that ecosystem as well, you know, you're interdependent with that ecosystem.
As mentioned earlier, this mine was inaugurated in 2013 by the then president. This was done while people were still living in the mining area and resettlement conversation had not even started. It took a court case and a long battle for the community to be finally resettled in 2019. The chairman of the mine wanted to show our head of camera the hospital, school, and football field, the great work Jindal had done. But when we visited the area on our own, what we found painted a starkly different picture.
Seems like there's a price to put on everything, and that is fundamentally contradictory to the way that people live here, you know, because you have a connection, you know that land, you don't want to be resettled elsewhere. The resettlements are also not done in accordance with traditions, with culture, you know, so they are building houses that make no sense for people.
Jina langu ndimwenda lewa lido luvanisi bora, kakhala kukasoka. Kukasoka dikakhala, dikalima, minda. Kulima kalima chimanga, kalima mapira mashwere. Dapfumbi tukubonea na so tukubonea na nyotayo. Na madzi kulibe mkhani ngati. Iwo adatuza, tukumangea nyumba. Nyumbazo adamanga kumanga lakita zinango zilibe kumala chinthu. Asa dundu litenga kule tichikuya kudzakhala tibe kula matidabvuma.
panango ambwela kutati kuonzera asina lero uno nyumba zimwezo atingimiza sife dikadalamba kwatukule tinchoka iko mugulu dikalima kwenekwene kwatukule agwabza kumanikiziwa tikubwani kuda amanikiziwa tingachitetani dabweradi.
The houses looked fine, boxes in a row, modern housing if you may call it. But this is not what people asked for. They have electricity, but they have to pay for it. No water, and 75% of the money promised to them for finding alternative land is still pending. One cannot uproot people from their ancestral homes, the land they made a living from, and justify it by giving them decent-looking houses in exchange. It may look good on CSR reports, but reality isn't as good for those who are living it.
Silveira José Joaquim. Estou aqui já há 5 anos neste lugar aqui. Então, lá onde estávamos, fazíamos negócio e o trabalho de garimpo. Exploração, carvão e mina, e ouro.
O governo sabe?
Sabe. Isso. Eu tenho fatura dele, a licença dele já. Como eu estava a trabalhar lá dentro, tenho a cópia da licença deles que eles tiraram lá. Não foi forçado, não foi a minha vontade. Sim, acordado com o governo, tudo. Não temos onde recorrer porque reclamávamos, prenderam pessoas aqui, nós fizemos greve. Então exigir nosso direito, então prenderam-nos. Até agora já não temos onde queixar, porque há uma parte que o governo comeu esse dinheiro. Veio cá o administrador confirmou que esse outro dinheiro gastamos, mas já vamos de dar. Até agora não temos, já vão já nos 6 anos que não nos dão nada. Quer dizer, dividiram nosso dinheiro, comeram nosso dinheiro. E por isso que já o governo já não quer que... Temos prova. Até eu fui preso uma vez quando estava a reclamar a questão da energia. Primeiro eles primeiro iam nos dar das casas a energia. Então não vamos pagar. A Jindal vai pagar. Então quando nós reclamamos, veio a EDM, fez instalações, por fim a EDM.
While Jindal is primarily known for coal, they have also been exploring for gold in Marara, a fact many locals were unaware of. Marara, which lies at the border of Moçambique, Zambia and Zimbabwe, has had a history of artisanal mining for gold and informal markets trading in gold. Due to the Chirodzi mine, people living in the area were forcibly moved to an arid region unsuitable for agriculture, robbing them of their livelihood.
However, in the international space, it is a space where companies have rights and people and countries don't. So companies, transnationals, have these structures that we can't use and don't exist. So there's an imbalance in power on that aspect as well. But also because a lot of these sectors, especially fossil fuels, are becoming very high risk with stranded assets as a problem. There's a lot of uncertainty, funding more complicated. They're transferring these investment risks to African countries. So you have the contracts becoming even more predatory to compensate for these risks. And things like, for example, in Mozambique, a lot of the benefits go first to the investor and then later comes to us.
This model of development that the government has been pursuing, which is not really about development, it's about creating this wealthy political and economic elites that are colluding with transnational capital. So these big, large-scale investments come to our country and they co-opt and corrupt local political elites to make sure that these kind of extractive projects move forward. And this is the context we're seeing from the south to the north of the country, to the point that we even have armed conflict, insurgency, and what some call terrorism in the north of the country, which is also very linked to the impact of extractive industries. We are a very, very rich country. We have so many natural resources. We have a lot of biodiversity and very rich ecosystems. Basically, we are skeptical to say that Vale was better, because it was not. They were really disrespectful in the way that they treated the people and communities, in terms of assuming that everyone can be bought with a compensation, with a monetary compensation. They did a whole lot of corporate social responsibility programs, giving bicycles to people, or giving trainings for employment, but people still continue to be unemployed even with the trainings. So they did do a lot of attempts to greenwash their image, but ultimately the impacts on the ground that we could see were really, really bad from Vale time. What we could see after Vale left, so basically when Vulcan took over, The same problems persisted, now with an added irresponsibility, because they, many times they say that these problems were created by our predecessor, by Val, and not, so we're not responsible. So we know this narrative, it's not legally, they're legally bound to still fulfill their responsibilities. What we do notice is that Vulcan does less of an attempt to communicate and to engage with the local community, so they've been mostly ignoring the pleas of local communities. There's a lot of issues around pollution that seem to have gotten much worse after Vulcan took over, because some of the environmental requirements and some of the environmental procedures that Val was carrying out, Vulcan is not doing anymore. So the intensity of the blasts, the proximity of the blasts in terms of the surrounding area and the neighborhoods got much worse.
Erika explains that the narrative of development often pushed by these companies like Jindal, wanting to showcase schools and football fields, clashes starkly with the lived realities of displacement, lost livelihood and environmental ruin.
Nós temos processos vários, né? Na Justiça, em que acabou tendo uma decisão de paralisação da mina para efeitos de melhorias ou correções, mas ficou evidente para nós, comunidade, ou seja, a mina nunca parou, a mineradora nunca parou, continuou a operar, e entendemos nós que o governo, como quem regula, em vez de estar do lado da comunidade, está do lado da mineradora e protege a mineradora. Então não há uma decisão. Começa a ficar claro aqui que temos que levar a luta para outros trâmites, para outros caminhos, levarmos a nossa queixa a nível internacional, porque aqui a nível nacional está cada dia mais claro que não teremos grandes resultados. Mandamos diversas cartas para as Nações Unidas, para a Embaixada dos Estados Unidos, a Embaixada da Índia, mandamos uma carta para a própria Vulcan, onde inicialmente nossa intenção era conversar de forma amigável e buscarmos soluções de forma amigável, mas também pouco feedback tivemos dessas entidades.
The story of Jindal's operations in Mozambique, both at Moitis and Chirodzi, is one of impunity. Court orders are defied, communities are ignored, and those who speak out face intimidation. Journalists like Estacio say that government officials are allegedly co-opted through contracts and other benefits, creating a system where corporate interests are prioritized over citizen welfare.
The politician is a small number of greedy people which are benefit not only from this mine but from mining in general, where for them the most important thing is the profit. But the fact is that people are still getting sick every day, they're dying. The people will take the right action with their hands because they've been waiting for the government to take action and the government's not doing enough. When you have a father which is not take care of you, you become a rebel because you are expecting the government to protect you and they're not doing it. So end up creating violence, and the violence creates more violence. And what's going to happen? The people will start burning all those machines. And then the government will start shooting the people with real bullets. What
Vulcan is doing in Moatize, it's just a continuation of the same pattern we've been seeing, elsewhere, even in Mozambique. The Jindal group that Vulcan is part of also has a mine in Marara, in another district from Tete province. As our law says that the companies or the investors need to resettle the families entirely, completely, complete the resettlement before any operation can start. So we had almost 300 families living inside the concession area. The mine being inaugurated by a president, we had families living less than 1 kilometer from the blasts, living under the clouds of dust, and even having to have authorization to transit from inside to outside of the concession area. We've even had a case of a woman that went out to give birth and then she couldn't come back in with the baby, the newborn. So we had lots of incidents happening because they were a fenced community, It was like they were prisoners of the mine. We see that it's the same pattern of reckless behavior, of complete disrespect by the local communities and complete disregard even for the environment and the pollution.
The problem with corporate impunity is that it doesn't exist by itself. It is fueled by the constantly shrinking civic space. Anti-terror laws, money laundering regulations, often framed for national security, are increasingly used to control NGOs and stifle dissent, making it harder for communities and organizations to organize and seek justice.
It's not only about challenging the coal and Jindal coal mining in Tet province. It's also about challenging Jindal's abuses in South Africa, in Botswana, and in India itself. And it's about building our coalitions across countries, across continents. And the modern tools are giving us the ability to be able to do that and to confront this global monster, which is, coming to eat all of our peoples alive. We need to fight back, and we need to fight back with our movement organizing and with South-South organizing, not the way that our leaders in India and China have the narrative, have the rhetoric, we are going to Africa and we are going to be giving to development projects there. These are not development projects for here. This is maldevelopment. The same thing that was happening in India. Now these models are being exported to other places. This is not what is nourishing life and livelihoods of people in Africa. It's taking away that. It's taking away lands. It's destroying a huge amount of forests. It's taking away the ability for Mozambicans to construct a country and a life that they desire.
The fight between communities in Tete and Jindal is not unique. Around the world, we are seeing the front lines of a global struggle taking shape against extractive model that prioritizes profit over people and planet. These groups learn from other groups fighting elsewhere. The geographies, companies might change, but the fight remains the same. Imagine living day in and day out, breathing coal dust, as Marcella has been since 1995. Imagine your child's laughter replaced by persistent cough, your land taken, your water gone, your voice silenced. This is the human cost of coal in Tete.
At a community level, our communities need to carry on raising the voice and raising the impact, because these have costs. The cost on health, the cost on livelihoods. If you start adding these costs and finding ways to transfer the economic responsibility to the projects, you can make the project not feasible. So you're going to have to add the economic costs to this project until the economic equation doesn't add up anymore.
In a recent development, another Indian company, this time a Government of India public sector undertaking, ICVL, International Coal Ventures Limited, which has been operating a mine in Tete for a decade, announced that it will double its mining capacity. We saw the mine of ICVL that is scarily close to the river. While people are fighting, environment being destroyed, lives put at risk, Jindal continues. A conglomerate worth almost $12 billion charges on. Even with the fluctuation in global coal trade and demands, both of Jindal's mines are overperforming their extraction. For the Chirodzi mine, in the fourth quarter of 2021, the output was up by 31%. Even the 2024 report shows a 14% increase in production over earlier quarters. Vulcan in 2022 produced over 11 million tons of coal, surpassing the 8.5 million tons produced in 2021. In 2023, it more than tripled production to almost 36 million. In 2024, it jumped to almost 52 million tons to become one of the world's largest metallurgical coal mining company. Vulcan was declared the biggest Mozambican company consecutively in 2022, 23 and 24. When we looked at the financial documents of JSPL, Jindal's parent company in India, we found that for the purchase of coal, JSPL paid Jindal Mozambique LDA $65 million in 2021, $206 million in 2022, and $168 million in 2023. JSPL also paid Vulcan $29 million in 2023 for the same purpose. In 2022, JSPL Mozambique Minerals LDA formed 3% of the Jindal Group's profit. By 2023, at 10%. With the lack of transparency in Mozambique and only consolidated filings in India, it is difficult to figure out the real profits these companies are making. But if Jindal Mozambique LDA forms 3% of the profit of the entire conglomerate globally at $23.7 million in 2022 and 5 times that is at $118.5 million in 2023, imagine the profit coming out of Vulcan, given that Vulcan is a much bigger operation. Though there are no financials available for Mozambique, thanks to the biggest companies of Mozambique report by KPMG, we have some numbers that reveal the scale of the operation. The 2023 KPMG report states Vulcan's revenue at $2.28 billion in 2022 and $1.2 billion in 2021. That is a massive 86% increase in revenue in just 1 year. While the Jindal Group continues to make substantial profits from Mozambique, the country continues to slip into poverty. In the 2022 Human Development Index, it ranked 185 out of 191 countries, with over 65% of the population living below poverty line. We sent several emails to both Jindal and Mozambique government for their response. While Jindal didn't respond, even after receiving the emails, reaching Mozambique government turned out to be really tricky. All the emails to the Ministries of Mines and Environment bounced back. As we wanted to be fair and give them a chance to respond, we printed the questions and hand-delivered them to both the ministries. That finally prompted an email from the Ministry of Mineral Resources asking for a WhatsApp number for a conversation. We responded with a number and also stressed them to answer the questions via email so there is no miscommunication or any gaps. After several reminders, we neither received a message or a call or any response from the Mozambique government. With the staggering profits of Jindal, one would assume that the face of Tete has changed. It has, but for the worse. These mines, this land, these lives represent a small glimpse of what's at stake. The people of Tete deserve more than cracked homes, poisoned air, resettlement that doesn't make sense, and lurking debt in their future. They deserve their land, their health, their children's future. But the question is, who will listen? Who will act? In all this, one thing is clear. Though the fight is long and hard, it is not a lonely one.